There's a specific kind of grief that nobody warns you about. It's not the grief of losing someone, it's the grief of looking in the mirror one day and not fully recognizing the person looking back at you. Not because something terrible happened, not because you made a wrong turn, but because you changed quietly over time in ways you didn't track or plan for. And somewhere in that changing, the version of yourself you used to know just wasn't there anymore. And instead of understanding what actually happened, instead of seeing it clearly, you decided you had lost yourself. Your future self needs to correct that because what you're calling loss has another name entirely. I'm picking up on something very specific for whoever found this video today. There was a version of you that felt easier to be. Not better, not more authentic, just easier. She knew the rules, she knew what was expected of her, she knew how to show up in rooms in a way that made sense to everyone around her without having to explain anything. And at some point, that version stopped fitting. Not all at once, it was more gradual, like wearing a coat that used to be the right size, and then one day noticing it's pulling at the shoulders, or it's tight across the back, or not quite long enough anymore, kind of like it shrunk. And instead of thinking, oh, I've grown, I need to get a different coat, you thought, something is wrong with me. I used to fit in this. Why don't I fit in this anymore? I'm also picking up on something about the people around you. Because when you started to change, when that old version started to not fit, some of the people in your life noticed, and some of them didn't like it. Not because you became someone bad, but because you became someone harder to manage, harder to control, someone with different edges than before, someone who asked different questions, who needed different things, who drew different lines, or what I'm visualizing right now is someone that colored outside of the lines. And some of those people, the ones most comfortable with that old version, told you in one way or another that you've changed and they didn't mean it as a compliment. And you took that in, and somewhere it became evidence evidence that you had lost something. You had lost something about yourself, that you were better before, that the coat used to fit and now it doesn't. And that means something went wrong. But your future self has been waiting to address this. You didn't lose yourself. You shed a version of yourself that was built for survival in an environment you no longer live in. Think about what that version of you was actually doing. She was keeping you safe. She was keeping the peace. She was making herself palatable enough that people who held power over her world would not feel threatened. She was brilliant at it. She had it down to a science. But here's what she couldn't do. She couldn't grow. Because growing means taking up more space. And she had learned very early on and very well that taking up space was dangerous. So the growth happened anyway, the way it always does when something alive is kept in a space too small for it. Think of reptiles. They tell you if you don't want the reptile to get too big, keep it in a smaller cage, keep it in a smaller enclosure. So it pushed against the edges. It changed the shape of things. It made the coat not fit. That wasn't loss. That was life doing exactly what life does when it's healthy. I want to describe something to you, and I need you to hear it without immediately finding the reason of why it can't be true. The version of you that exists right now, the one that feels like the evidence of something lost, she is more herself than any version before her. She knows things the old version didn't. Not facts, not information, but she knows what she actually needs. She knows what she will no longer accept. She knows the difference between a room that's safe and a room that just feels familiar. She knows her own voice now. Not perfectly, not without having some doubts, but she can hear it and she listens to it more often than she used to. That's not someone who lost herself. That's someone who found herself underneath everything that had been stacked on top. This one, your future self feels strongly about. She wants you to understand something about the people who told you you had changed, or who made you feel like that new version of you was somehow less than the old one. They were not wrong that you changed, but they were wrong about what that meant. What they were actually saying, even if they didn't know it at the time, was you used to be easier for me. You used to require less of me. You used to make me feel comfortable in ways you no longer do. That's really not about you. That's about them. The people who are meant to be in your life as you grow, the ones who actually belong in the next chapter, they're not threatened by who you're becoming. They're drawn to it. Your future self wants you to use that as a filter. The people who pull back as you expand, let them. Let them. The people who lean in, those are your people. I want to share something. There was a season where I didn't recognize myself either, where everything that used to feel automatic suddenly felt foreign, where the way I used to move through the world just stopped working. And what I know now, and what your future self knows, is that the disorientation of becoming is the most natural thing in the world. It only feels like loss because we don't have a good language for growth that happens when it's happening from the inside out. So, here is what your future self needs you to walk away with today. Stop grieving the coat that doesn't fit anymore. Stop trying to shrink back into the version of yourself that was built for rooms you no longer live in, that you no longer believe in, that you have no business walking into. The disorientation you're feeling, the not quite recognizing yourself in the mirror feeling, that's not a symptom of something wrong. That's what it feels like to be between versions of yourself. And between versions is exactly where she, your future self, was right before everything changed. You didn't lose yourself. You're becoming her. Until next time, stay magnetic, friends.